Hi, Eldin. How are you today? It's great to have you on the Lives of the Artists.
Thank you very much, Nick. Glad to be on your show.
Now, you are an amazing art historian and you're also an artist, and you have the Immortal Art Podcast as well, which I'm a huge fan of and listen to every episode that comes out. But why don't you introduce yourself to the audience a little bit?
Well, my name is Eldin. I'm Bosnian, living currently in Sweden. Currently, for the past 11 years almost. Uh, no, actually 11 years. Uh, 2020, 20th August will be 11 years since I live in Sweden. Oh, time goes fast. I finished art school. I didn't go to regular high school. So instead of, let's say, mathematics, we had geometry. Instead of grammar of the Bosnian language, we had to read world's classics.
Was that at art school?
Yes.
Mhm.
For example, first book that we read was Gilgamesh, Epic of Gilgamesh, and then we progressed historically until 20th century in the fourth year because uh, art school was 4 years, not three. And after that, I wanted to study Academy of Fine Art in Sarajevo, but I couldn't do it because, well, a lot of stuff. And then after that, I studied cultural sociology and philosophy, modern philosophy. But for some reason, even though that I was studying modern philosophy, I was stuck in the ancients, and I liked how they thought, and not all of them, but I liked uh, Stoicism and cynicism, or cynicism and then Stoicism. Uh, and then I went to academy school in Sarajevo, but I was expelled. And then I
You were expelled from art school.
yes,
You must
uh,
have been extremely naughty.
yes, I was. I was not politically suitable for the regime at the time because I supported LGBT community without Q in that time. That was in 2007, 2008. And yeah, I had a lot of problems with my teachers, and some of the teachers stand behind me, some of them were against me. And then I met this girl from Sweden, and it was a story of like, okay, if I get expelled, I don't know what to do. And before I get expelled, I moved to Sweden.
So that's what took you to Sweden. And
Yes,
what made you start your podcast, the Immortal Art Podcast?
I I watched a lot of documentaries on art, BBC, Channel 4, Swedish one, French one from art, and I liked them a lot. And then I start watching on the pandemic. I start watching a lot of YouTube videos about art, and I was very frustrated because there was not a lot of facts, and a lot of misunderstanding of art, a lot of people who thought they knew something after reading maybe one book, or maybe reading an article, or watching another YouTuber. And my frustration grew until I started doing podcast for for Spotify. And then I met this because I have art dialogues where I speak with art historians, artists, historians, or people that I'm interested in, but mostly about art. I met this Dutch dude who encouraged me to do YouTube instead. And since then, since episode 58, I think, I'm doing YouTube.
Well, I'm a big fan, and it's you have a particular
Thank you.
interest in prehistoric art. I mean, there's a big focus on prehistoric art. So, where does your interest in prehistoric art come from, and ancient art come from? It's a fascinating subject, really fascinating, and there's not that much known about it compared to other eras of art, the Baroque and Renaissance and modern art, and all of these different eras are so well documented. But there's a lot of mystery in prehistoric art and art of deep time.
Yes. Well, uh, my channel now, or my YouTube channel, or Spotify podcast, or Spotify and Apple and all of that podcast, it's a chronological art history. So I had to begin from the beginning. And the beginning was in Africa. So 78,000 years in, but I think it's called Bulbos Cave in Africa, 78,000 years ago. That's the first art that human made or that we know of.
And can you
And
describe it to us?
it's a part of, uh, they believe it was a part of a larger piece, but it's, I don't know inches, but in maybe 12 centimeters, I think. And it's deliberate markings of X and some patterns. It was made, nobody knows why it was made, but it was made 78,000 years in 78,000 years ago in Blombos Cave in Africa.
Which country in Africa is that?
I think that's South. Oh, you put me on the spot. I
South
think
Africa.
I think it's South Africa.
So
Uh,
it's not a painting. It's actually a
yes,
tiny little sculptured object.
yes. And I had a opportunity to speak with Genevieve Petzniger. I recommend everybody who is interested, even little bit in prehistoric art, should read her book 32 Signs. And I had the opportunity to get in touch with her, and I did it for in that time just audio for the podcast. We had a beautiful, beautiful dialogue about what is essence of art, why it started art, why, and we spoke about Blombos Cave, and nobody knows. And my hypothesis was, what if somebody was doodling, like you as an artist know that as a painter, sometimes you doodle stuff. And what if somebody was waiting, I don't know, you know, a meal to be cooked and start doing something out of boredom? We don't know why it's made or why what was its purpose, but it was interesting. And the next art, cave art that we know, so 78,000 years ago, and then 63,000 years ago in Sulawesi in Indonesia. I think it's pronounced Sulawesi.
Yeah, Sulawesi. Yeah.
Yes, and it's 60. First, they thought it was 45,000 years ago. 45, sorry, 45,000 years old. But then they did some fungus DNA. I really don't know science, but they did something and they concluded that the pigment was put first 65,000 years ago. And Adam Brom, who discovered it, well, he didn't discover it. It was always already there, but he did a research there with his Indonesian team and Australian, and he is convinced that there is older art somewhere in the world. We just didn't find it yet.
Yeah, I'm sure he's right. I mean, that's fascinating, isn't it? So you jump from 73,000 years ago to, you said, 68,000 years in Indonesia?
Other way around, from 78,000 years ago to 65.
To 65. Okay,
Yeah,
so you've got like a 13,000 years missing there with all
yeah.
kinds. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of artifacts and works of art that are still waiting to be recovered. But I often wonder and think about those early artists and early man and how they would have lived and what they would have been, what would have been going on in their heads. It would have been, I mean, very stripped back. Life would have been very simple. We have lots of distractions these days. It would have been very much an emphasis on getting food and surviving and shelter and fire. But what kind of mindset do you think those early artists had? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, of course. It's always on my mind. Who were those people? Because, you know, we thought for a really long time that Europe is the cradle of art. Chauvet, 40,000 years ago, is the first art. But actually, now we know that is Solowezi and Blumbos, and now we know that Neanderthals made art. And there is even suggestions, but that it's a little bit controversial. But do you know who is? There was this cave. I don't remember what it's called, but it's also in South Africa, and they discovered a new species called Homo naledi. It was. Do you know about it?
No.
So it was in the same maybe 300,000 years old, but it had the features of uh, hominid or ape-like upwards, but it was bipedal, like Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, Homo Neanderthal, and they discovered scratches in this cave when they buried their dead, and they buried the dead. So there is a concept of afterlife, and they found these scratches on the wall almost the same as the Neanderthal did in Europe 150,000 years ago. So there's a little bit of controversy. So we don't we don't know why people made art. There is also animals who make art. For example, this uh, Japanese Japanese fish that goes into this pattern making of circles in the water and makes these patterns to attract females, and that's art. That's a pattern. There is this, I don't remember the exact name of the bird, but one in South Africa that makes the male makes uh, some kind of a dance for the ladies, and if they like him, they will stay and they will mate. So art per se is human endeavor, but also there are species who make art as well, even maybe they're not conscious it's art. But when I think about those people who made first art, my first thought goes to, of course, Solowezi and Blombos, but what happened in between? And then you have something like Chauvet. And when you see Chauvet cave, 40,000 years, approximately 40,000 years ago, it's already a masterpiece. Where is this progression of making doodles and then going to make something as Chauvet cave?
Yeah,
There
how
is
does it evolve? That's a really
exactly.
interesting idea. I mean, you don't just suddenly create a tiny object. There's a huge evolution that predates that. And, how do you work out how to paint on those caves with such sophistication, with the, replicating the animals that they would have hunted, I guess. Um, but how do you do that? Where does that evolve from? It's fascinating, fascinating thing, and the thousands of years that it took to get to that point.
I think I have 5 or 6 caves in Europe that I'm gonna do, and then Upper Paleolithic, and then it goes North Africa and Africa, then Middle East, India, China, and Americas and Australia. So there is so much knowledge about Upper Paleolithic art, but there is no, how will I put this? There is no YouTube channels or uh, podcast on Spotify who talks about it. Bits and pieces, yes, but not chronologically, and not every single cave and or rock shelter. So, and to I cannot stop thinking about those people, how they lived, what they did, what they were dreaming of, what they were fear, what did they had same fears as us? Did they had same needs as us? Were
Have you ever tried to live like sort of Stone Age man and go and
no,
camp or anything like that? Have you
no.
ever been camping, for example,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
something like that? Like when you go camping, like you're stripped back of the luxury of having a house. But for some reason, you really appreciate little things like making a campfire, or you appreciate the sun in the morning, seeing the sunrise, experiencing the sunset. And your sort of physical being and your whole attitude and state of mind changes very quickly. But you really do appreciate these smaller things. That's why it's good to get out of your space and then go camping and do those kind of things, because it makes you appreciate the world in a different way. But I mean, they would have just been totally, in that stripped back way of living, sleeping on the floor. There would have been a huge emphasis on these smaller things like making a campfire, things that we totally take for granted. But there would have been a huge, huge emphasis on getting food, because their whole lives would have been based around getting food. Without food, they couldn't have survived.
Not per se,
No.
because I read this. I read a lot of books about it, and one of the books that stuck out was a book called Sex at Dawn. And here, this researcher, he talked about how he observed these hunter-gatherers in Africa, or I think it was in Africa, that they were going to hunt, they would hunt, and then they would have a rest of the week off because they had so much food, so much meat. So it was a leisure time. So,
Christopher Ryan, Dr. Christopher Ryan is his name.
yes, Christopher.
Sex at Dawn. Yeah, he said that basically their lives would have been a lot more, free. Not such a big emphasis on work. They would have rested and played for a lot of the time, and then gone and done these hunts for food, every few days and things like that. Uh, yeah, it's interesting that I find that that concept is interesting, because I've been out camping and I've been tried to live outdoors for weeks on end, maybe not weeks on end, but like 5 days in a row. It gets tough, and I've got a tent and things like that. It gets tough. But
Yes,
yeah,
but
I'm interested in that concept. That's very fascinating.
yeah, but imagine that all of your life you don't know anything else about, and you don't know anything else except being in the cave, occasionally going to another cave maybe, and hunt. If you are born there and you learn how to hunt and how to capture animals very early, maybe as a kid you will climb on a tree and take the eggs, maybe go and pick berries. Maybe your first animal, or first hunt would be a small rodent, wild chicken, wild turkey, wild rabbit, hare, har. How you say hare?
Yeah, yeah.
Hare. So, and I always think about those people. And what I'm always reminded is Chauvet Cave and New Cave.
The
If you
Chauvet
look,
cave you're referring to is in southern France. Is that right?
yes,
Hmm.
New as well. And there is these footsteps of children in New Cave, a lot of them. And you can see these small footsteps going around, and somebody was playing there. Some kids were playing there. And there's a not adult footsteps, but almost. So they would probably be adolescent kids. And I think always they were playing hide and seek in the really deep part of the cave. And then there is in Chauvet,
Oh, that's
and they and I mean it's such an extraordinary moment that nature captured. And there is also in Chauvet Cave there is a kid, maybe like 5, 6 years old, very small child, and a wolf footsteps next to it, but they never cross each other. So that means either they're in between them, they're thousands of years, or the kid had a pet who was a dire wolf.
wow,
That was
incredible.
good. Exactly. You know,
There's
And
so much mystery to ancient history. Just there's so much mystery to existence. But back then there's so much we don't know. There's so much mystery to it that that mystery is so important in life. It's just such an important aspect of life. I don't think it's really thought about or discussed enough. But that unexplainable, that unknown, that strangeness, and I think when you try and depict that in life, I really resonate with art that depicts that kind of strangeness, like a Hieronymus Bosch painting or even a Francis Bacon painting. It's just like this strangeness and this strange psychology that you're trying to convey. Um, but yeah, I'm particularly interested in how the ancient peoples would have lived, their daily existence. Incredible, absolutely incredible. So, do you think that they were trying to paint animals that they were eating, and those animals, because it gave them life, they kind of became gods?
mm, you know, there is so many hypotheses and theories uh, why they painted these animals. My favorite, one of, I mean, I don't know how to say it. It's not the favorite, but one of the favorite. But all of them are favorite to me. There is a cave called on Russian Kapova cave. Kap on Slavic languages mean dropping because it drops a lot of water. In that cave, that was in part of Ural Mountains. If you know Bashkir people, they fought Napoleons with the arrows. It's amazing people, and they had such a rich history. But they're part of Russian Federation and Russian Tsardom for centuries. They have their a cave called Shulgan Tash, and there in Ural Mountains. So that's almost Siberia and almost northern hemisphere. But somebody was there in that cave some 25,000 years ago and draw a camel. That means that somebody had to walk from that cave when they saw a camel, and it's anatomically correct camel. It's not that was told by there's this animal that's strange looking animal who looks like this. If you remember these medieval paintings of rhinoceros, or it was always retold, and the artist would painted those animals in imagination. So for example, giraffes looks like horses with a really long neck, or goats with a long neck. But
Yeah,
this
you can
person,
you can tell that they were told stories about these wild animals in far off countries, and
yes,
they imagined what they were like on paper or on canvas. But you're saying that this particular painting in this cave is anatomically correct, so he must have seen it in person, or she.
he or she or they, or maybe they went from the cave somewhere, maybe. And I was watching the old maps of 25,000-year-old Siberia, and the camels are not famous for living in that kind of camels are not famous for living in harsh environments. So that means that this person had to go somewhere south for maybe 1,000 kilometers south, see, and they were fascinated by camel. Maybe they ate it, and who knows why, came back and draw a camel. Or somebody from the camel living area came to that cave and painted a camel. I mean,
So it's unexplained. No one really
exactly.
knows. Yeah. Yeah, insane. That's incredible. I mean, perhaps the climate back then was different, so camels could have ventured further from their natural habitat. I'm not sure. Would that be an option?
Well, because it's a two hemp camel, and two hemp camels are famous for living in Mongolia and Kazakhstan.
Oh, it
And
was a Bactrian camel. A
yes,
Bactrian camel, yeah.
exactly. And these are Bactrian people that I was telling you about. But even then, they had to travel some because that part of the world had maybe sheets, how say, ice sheets very close. So that means that those camels were more south than in the it is only one camel ever.
Amazing. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah, I've been to Mongolia before and it's just the most insane. I mean, it's just magical, but it's beautiful, but it's harsh. They have so much sunlight. So the Mongolian people are very dark skinned. Um, there's a lot of sun, but it's freezing cold. And it's very windy as well. So they have no trees on the plains. There's the tree seeds can't settle on the huge Mongolian plains. It's just this very raw existence that they still live today. And there they have Bactrian camels. You see them in the south of Mongolia, and those Bactrian camels go all the way down into Western China and into Central Asia as well.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know that, but I thought that camels were living more south than I just read some papers that suggest that they had to travel a lot to make that animal to meet that animal. And when you think about clothes and you think about domestication of animals, somebody had to sit there and maybe observed animals or wolves and said, it will be really nice to have that wolf to help me hunt. And somebody had to do the first step of taking the wild animal as a puppy or maybe as an who knows how it goes.
So
But
do you have any going back to the original question, do you
yeah,
have any concept of why they were drawing animals on cave walls? I know they also did hand marks are very common on cave walls as well. But I mean, if you could sort of summarize why exactly they were, well, or your ideas about why they were painting animals in those particular animals, what do you think?
I don't know because I read so many books and so many papers about it that my mind is racing always on this poetic side of myself, who is always trying because when they found these bones, what they ate, it was actually rabbits and rodents and wild dogs, rarely a mammoth. They ate them, but it was rarity.
But they
They
also have bison. Surely
by
they would have eaten bison.
probably, but you know, there's a lot of uh, cave bear bones and skulls, especially in Chauvet Cave. It's most famous for it. And maybe it gave them power. Maybe it gave them. There is evidence that animals drawn had a lot of marks in them, like somebody would take a spear and point at it. There is a, uh, I don't remember. I
Oh,
don't
so they
remember.
would have used them as like target practice almost.
Yes, or maybe it was more of a symbolic gesture of maybe a clan leader when he or she would prepare for the hunt. They would paint this. Okay, we are going to paint now. We're going to hunt now a cave bear. Let's paint it. Now everybody is gonna kill it first on the wall. We have its spirit. Now we go on the real hunt. I mean, and
Yeah,
then
that makes sense. But obviously, I'm jumping to conclusions. But yeah,
yeah, me too.
in symbolically, they're painting these animals on the cave, and then in their imaginations, they're doing some sort of ceremony to capture them, to give them luck, or to do some sort of ceremony before the hunt. Yeah, that I mean that's logical to me, but whether that makes sense in history is difficult to know.
Yeah. Just 1 second. I have to tell you this cave that had a bear that it's mm, puking blood. I don't remember the cave. I,
The bear was vomiting blood, or
yeah,
oh my
yeah,
God, that's insane.
the drawing of it, but I cannot find
What was the date on that painting?
20,000 years ago.
Right.
Ah, Three Brothers in France or Trois Frères Cave. I don't know how to pronounce French. I think
Wow.
is this one. So
So this is a cave with a painting of a bear with blood coming out of its mouth.
and it has marks, like somebody decapitated it or slides its head and slides its arm, and there's a lot of circles in it. And
20,000 years ago is
yeah,
not that long.
yeah,
I mean, it is long, but I mean, it's a lot closer to us than 78,000 years ago that you were discussing
yeah.
with the South African, the first artifact that was ever found. But yeah, it's just so hard to imagine their lives. I mean, I'm always fascinated in history of like how people would have been and how they would have thought. And yes, they would have been human like us, but they would have been completely different people, completely different. I mean, you know, we're so distracted nowadays, you know? We're so distracted with nonsense. Internet, bills to pay, where am I going to park the car? All of these tiny little details that, if someone was told you have to go and hunt and get your own food and build a shelter and make it warm, people would freak out. No one knows how to do those skills anymore.
Yes, but all of those people were born into it. So from the young age, you will know how to survive this because that was part of the daily life. Hey,
But
look at
what I'm
this.
saying is
Yeah,
that for so long humans have lived like that
yeah,
for hundreds of thousands of years, then surely that's more natural to us, that
yeah,
way
yeah,
of
yeah. Oh,
life,
yeah.
than the life we're living now. We're almost forced to be unnatural now. It's like we almost don't have a choice. If people wanted to live off grid and in caves and things like that, they're considered like freaks.
Mm,
But that's almost a more natural way of living. We've evolved to be like that rather than how modern humans are living.
yeah. Well, for example, I'm talking now about Europe. Gravettians, Magdalenians, Aurignacians, uh, Solutreans, they were people who were actually very tall, especially Gravettians for the time they're living. On average, men would be 180 centimeters tall.
I
But
thought you were talking about Game of Thrones there for a second,
why?
because it sounds like Game of Thrones characters and people in Game of Thrones. Where were the Graveckians from?
Gravettians, that's the whole Europe. Gravettians from approximately Portugal up to southeastern Europe. And most of the DNA today with the Gravettian blood are three, well, three nations in Europe. That's Swedes, people from Netherlands, and Bosnians in the high mountains of Bosnia, because Bosnia is like, on average, 600 meters above sea level. And in these mountains of Bosnia, or these isolated pockets in Netherlands and Scandinavia, Sweden, very isolated places, they still have this traces, most most than other Europeans. Most of these people in mountains in Bosnia, these pockets in Netherlands and Scandinavia have Gravettian blood. And that's very fascinating to me. Who were Gravettian? They were people who actually started doing art in, but they had explosion of art, explosion, and they had these spear throwers that they were developing, and a bow and arrow, and they were so creative, and they covered huge distances. And if you ever observe map of France and all the Gravettian sites, they're really close to each other. But I mean, Gravettians are very fascinating people. I have episode about them as well. And I lost my point somewhere.
What
Sorry.
years were the Graveckians?
I think it was from mm 25 to 17,000 years ago.
Right.
And
And
then,
it's
yeah, and then I'm really bad with numbers. The last ice age people in Europe were actually Magdalenians. And after that, it's coming Mesolithic and Neolithic. And all of these people both both people and ideas that came from Middle East of agriculture and everything else. With it, people start having less nutritious food, abundant but less nutritious, because people were working in the field and stuck at one place. Dravetians and our nation and Solutreans and Magdalenians, they were really athletic people. There's no big difference.
They were nomadic and they were hunter gatherers.
Yes, and there's, if you observe skeletons, there's no big difference between male and woman, male and female, because they were so robust, athletically built, and they science. I don't know how that works, but they were looking at those bones and comparing to the bones of athletes, and they had better bones than modern day athletes. These
If
tendons
if
and
you want to read a good book, and you probably have read it, I'm not sure. Have you ever read *Sapiens* by Noah Yuval
yeah, yeah,
Harari?
yeah.
And he describes humans in deep time, what he refers to as deep time, which I think is a good way of explaining it. You know, prehistory, before we really, start recording history properly, and ancient history, which started being recorded sort of 2, 3, 4,000 years ago. I guess Egyptian history, but he explains in that book what life would have been like in the most amazing way, almost like in a psychedelic dream way. It's an amazing explanation of how people would have lived back then. I highly recommend it to anyone that hasn't read *Sapiens* by Noah Yuval Harari. But humans have this incredible ability and need to tell stories. Storytelling and imagination is such a fundamental part of human existence. Um, yeah, why do you think that is? Where does that come from? How does that sort of represent itself in ancient art?
oh, I don't know, man. That's a really tough question for me to answer. I mean, you know, we don't we don't know the stories, but there is this amazing researcher who made, I don't know, let's say 20 years of research into Paleolithic, Upper Paleolithic of Europe. Her name is Genevieve von Petzniger. And she went all of these caves around Europe and noticed there is 32 signs of all the people who lived in that area, and they communicated something. We don't know what they communicated, but it's almost like it's not letters as we know it. It's a more of a concept. It's not even like Egyptians that they had concepts of two different signs make a word. These were signs almost randomly, but all caves have them. Some have more, some have less, but all these 32 signs are predominant in Europe, in all the caves.
Not in
And
other areas of the world.
I think there is few in Middle East, just a few of those 32, and that's it. So there was some kind of a communication, some kind of a storytelling. And if you see Chauvet Cave, or if you see, let's say, Three Brothers in France, or Altamira, there is a story there. We don't know what it is, but there is a story. Maybe, as we spoke earlier, they hunted and prepared for the hunt, or maybe somebody hunted those animals and then told stories. This is how I hunted that animal. There is a story there that is lost to us. I have my ideas why.
Well, so much is lost.
Yeah, yeah,
Language is lost.
yes,
Stories are lost. When language is lost, stories are lost as well. You know, the ways of describing things are gone. All of those ancient languages are completely they just don't exist anymore. So it's amazing to think of all of that kind of going or evolving. I guess you could look at it that way. But yeah, it's not like we stopped talking. We evolved.
yeah. But what is fascinating to me is, as I progress to the this chronological art history, and the more I'm coming towards beginning of Mesolithic and Neolithic. So now I'm doing the episode about. Actually, I think I published it already. Uh, this cave shelter, and it was on open, 20 meters, and there is women there, three women without head and without feet, without arms, just their torso and thighs. And then there is a small portrait above them. What's that story? And then there is beneath them a bison. So I was wondering, was that a story about three three women in the three stages of women? Because one looks very young, another one is a little bit rounded, and the third is a little bit undetermined. But these medieval paintings of young, uh, middle-aged, and old people, and the death with them. So I was thinking, did they thought about death? you know, Maybe why is that bison there? Is those were those three women representing fertility, or maybe they were three great huntresses? But what's this portrait up doing? There's a story there that we will never know. And there's a bison that somebody carved in the stone, and somebody came and made it into a goat. Why?
Wow. And what were the materials that they used back then to paint? Was it just simple mud, different colored muds, or were there
Mm,
other elements involved?
No. They had all red ochre and black. Red ochre. And I spoke with this uh, I think he was the first or the second person who I ever had on our dialogues. Uh, Thomas, I forgot his last name. He's Italian. He's a experimental archaeologist, and he told me that these uh, colors that they would have from a gold, not gold, how you say, a golden yellowish stone that they would burn and then make it into a powder that will become red. So there is magic in it. Maybe
Alchemy.
exactly alchemy. But for me, I'm always thinking poetically. Oh, it's a magic. So that means that somebody had to find it. First of all, somebody had to figure it out that if you take this golden yellowish stone and make it into a powder and burn it, it will be red. First that. And second of all, when you have that knowledge, somebody had to, it's not, it's laying around. You have to find that stone. So that means also that somebody went in the search. So there is also story in that too. And they would take sort of I, I assume, bone or a hollow tree trunk, and then put it on under the water, and then one would stick up uh, bone, and they would spit, and they would make splashes of color. Same with the hands, same with the old patterns, but also, they could take charcoal from the burned wood and make paintings.
And they would
And
use the charcoal to draw.
yeah,
It's not dissimilar to making oil paint today. I mean, when
exactly.
I used to make paints a lot, not so much anymore, but it's exactly the same thing. You take powder, different colored powders made from different chemicals. Before they would have just been made from stones and things that, like lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and it was famous in Europe because it was the most expensive pigment. But what I'm saying is the ancient people in deep time, they would have basically made paints in a similar way, but instead they wouldn't have used oil, they would have used water. Is that right?
Spit.
Spit. So it's a kind of different, it was a bit different from, there was a bit more grip to it, I guess.
Yeah,
It held the surface better. I guess that's why they used to spit. Oh,
I can.
wow, incredible. And so the images of the hands on the cave, they would have literally put their hands flat on the wall, and then they would have just spat this inky paint kind of substance that they made
Yes.
from their spit over their hands to make those. Some of the caves you see hundreds of different hands silhouetted all over the caves, and it's incredible to see.
Yeah. But two things that I want to tell you when you made this comment about hands. There's Chauvet cave that some artist, and we know it's one, because he or she had a crooked finger, this pinky, how you say, not pinky finger, but this ring finger. It
Yeah,
was a crook. It was crooked a bit, and this person made all of the all of the paintings of his or her hand all over Chauvet.
and they're all crooked. They've all got this crooked
Yes,
finger.
yes. So
Wow, I
that
did not
that
know
means
that.
it somebody was obsessed with the painting, and but also, 65,000 years ago. That's the second thing that I want to say. 65,000 years ago, in Sulawesi Cave, Indonesia, you have this warty pig that they hunted because they didn't have lions and uh, rhinoceros. They had warty pigs, and they painted these warty pigs and also hand stencils.
And
So
completely unconnected. It just shows that there's
exactly,
something within our subconscious or within our soul or spirit or whatever you want to say.
yeah,
It has this connection with kind of representing the hand being the object that we make things with, and that represents something very deep to humans.
yeah, like it was I who made this.
Were Neanderthals making art?
Yes, but they were more, let's say, abstract images that we don't know what they mean. But there is a Pasiega cave in Spain filled with, and we know by dating, it wasn't human. So that means it was Neanderthal.
Because they were much more successful than humans in terms of survival. They were
Oh
around for
yeah.
250,000 years in Europe alone, weren't they?
Yes. Yeah. People until maybe 1960s presented Neanderthals as this brutish ape-like humanoid that didn't know much about anything, but there's evidence that they build houses, or not houses but tents within the caves. Neanderthals made of stone and ivory bone, and they were more robust. So, for example, I spoke with this researcher, and he spoke about Neanderthal, and he told me that if you would compare bones of humans today and Neanderthals, we are very brittle, but most of the injuries that Neanderthal had on their bones are most, how say this? They're almost exactly like those of rodeo in America, those who ride horses and bulls.
Yeah, rodeo horse riding. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what they're called. So, but they will also heal very quickly than humans. And we interbred this Swedish Estonian scientist, Svante Pääbo. He made this. He made the DNA with a Neanderthal, and he discovered that if you are outside of Africa, you have Neanderthal DNA in yourself.
Well, they talk about that in Sapiens. There's a whole section on that in Sapiens, and he said it would have been mostly the Neanderthal women that would have been stolen to sort of, yeah.
You know, Neanderthals were, like MMA fighters comparing to Homo sapiens. So I would assume that maybe humans were maybe sex slaves to Neanderthals.
So you
That's
think it was that way around?
Yes, because Neanderthals was bigger, smaller, but more robust, and they had, for example, their chest was wider than ours, so they could breathe more. We could run more, but they were like a MMA fighter or how you say uh, somebody who can sprint 100 meters very fast, but we were more marathon runner
Yeah.
because we
So
came from
Homo
savannah.
sapiens were better at long distance running.
Yes,
And that's often how we would track down prey and kill prey, wouldn't it? We'd tire out animals because not unlike us, we're designed to sweat through our skin and then it evaporates. Whereas you can overheat animals quite easily over about 20 miles. And a lot of the time, that's how we were tracking down prey, and they would just die of exhaustion, just keel over. They would kind of know how long it would take, and it would take like a day of tracking them, and then eventually, from just moving too much, from just being chased for days on end, they would just keel over and die.
yeah. And after few of these caves that I have in Europe, and I have in total maybe 20 more caves around the world, and then I will go to Mesolithic and Neolithic, and that's what I'm very exciting to speak about. First cities and first, well, cities. They were more like villages, small villages like Göbekli Tepe, why it's made the oldest, most inhabited place in the world, Jericho, in Jerusalem, because in Jerusalem, I think that city start not by the name Jerusalem, but they had per se, was it Jerusalem or just Jericho?
I think Jericho is the oldest inhabited,
Yeah,
but still inhabited. There was obviously older inhabitations
yeah,
before that, but Jericho is the city in the world that's still inhabited. But I think it's more
yes.
like 12,000 years.
Yes, I mean, and they're pushing back and back and back. When they discovered the Göbekli Tepe, and they said, "Oh, it's unique," but then they discovered more of these sites. And there is in Turkey, it has this Turkish name that I cannot pronounce,
Well, you know,
unfortunately.
there's a theory about Göbekli Tepe that um, they didn't build that because of agriculture so much as making beer.
Yeah, yeah, beer. I spoke with I I I'm about to publish the episode with Peter. He is researcher for 30 years who with his colleagues who said it goes like this. Plants means fibers, fibers means clothes, clothes made beer, beer made bread. In that
Right, so
order.
beer came first, and there was much
Yeah.
more importance to it. Obviously, there's a lot of symbolism and
Yes.
sort of ceremony around drinking, getting drunk. But yeah, they think that those early inhabitations were more about the ceremony of beer rather
Yeah.
than farming and
Ye-
staying in the same place to farm.
Do you know a theory about what is called ape uh, stone ape theory?
Yeah, the stoned ape theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we were sort of monkey-like creatures, and then we found mushrooms and marijuana, and that changed our whole psychology. Would that be the right way of explaining it?
Not marijuana, but only psychedelic mushrooms, and that
And that
expanded.
expanded our mind.
Yeah, that's why we uh, progressed very rapidly, more rapidly than any animal in the world, and we had free hands as well.
And
When we
that's also
free,
why we've got such big brains in
yes,
comparison to our bodies.
and if you speak of a children, and any parent would tell that children are children until 12, 13. you know that's the longest in the whole animal kingdom. When you have a gazelle, that gazelle when it's born, uh, it takes few seconds to learn how to run, how to find mother and father. we
Yeah,
we are
they're born ready. Humans
yes,
aren't born ready at all. It
yeah,
takes them such a long time
yes, and
to learn how to do anything, really.
yeah, and I think 25 is when the brain is stop forming, like, okay, now it's done. 25.
I think women's brains form a lot earlier though. That's why they're a lot brighter when
Yeah.
when kids are at school. I
Yeah.
remember being at school and the girls in my class were a lot more developed, and if they sort of were a lot more mature than the boys.
Yes, I don't know. But also, there is something. I have a daughter, and there is something really biological. I thought, these concepts of female, male, it's all constructed like, oh no, there is some things that are biological. And I have a friend who is a researcher in a child development. And when all of this talk about what is male, what is a female, he decided to give his boys only dolls to play and to see what will happen. And of course, his boys took legs and made it as a pistols and weapon, and cut the hair to look more men, like action figures. And there is some biological differences. And I noticed with my daughter, you can put it when she's with the girls, everybody's playing, but as moment, and they're 5 years old, moment one boy came, they're all silent. It's very strange to observe the development with your own children and fascination what they do and how will they.
Also amazing to see how creative they are. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
children are so naturally creative. It's just such a natural way of being for a child to play with things and work things out and see what things do and just have this curiosity about the world that we lose, you know. I mean, so many adults, I guess you'd call, people, I don't know, people that grow up that just lack curiosity, just simple
Yes.
curiosity about things. I find the world endlessly fascinating, and I'm constantly interested and trying to experience new things and understand things. And some people just lose that, it just, I don't know if it just like work just drums it out of them and school drums it out of them and it just gets drummed out of them, and it's sad to see because it's a beautiful thing when you see kids just so curious and creative as well.
Oh, there's evidence that a lot of kids made cave art. If you,
Interesting.
uh, I don't know if you remember in one of the episodes, I don't remember right now which one, but there's these horses. I think it was Altamira, but I'm not 100%, or somewhere in Spain or southern France, or what is now. They didn't have the concept of Spain or France 40,000 years ago. Uh, but there's these beautiful horses in yellow and reddish and black. And then underneath, there's three horses that are like their heads are big as their feet. And that's definitely a child who's making that.
Wow.
You can see above them these beautiful horses that somebody knew anatomy, knew how to make these lines in one go. And then you see these three small horses that are just like, this is the head, this is the. It must have been child who did it. I'm
Wow, that's
I'm
incredible that they were doing it communally and they were doing it together. Just imagining the scene now just brings shiver down my back. It's amazing to think about that.
Yeah, or maybe what if, this is a sacred cave, you are not allowed to paint anything, and the kids like you. Some kids are like that. You're telling me I should not paint, goes there and paints and try to mimic the same, and maybe it stay there forever. And the parents and the whole community was really angry at this. We will never know. Or maybe the artist, father or mother, like, hey, do you want to paint? Yeah, sure. Here you go and paint with me. There's endless possibility why this person made this uh, horses and why this kid made this horses. Maybe, you know endless possibility. Whatever you choose, you are probably right. you know
It's incredible to think, and I can see you've got so much passion and interest in the ancient world and this sort of prehistoric art. It's your eyes light up when you're talking about it, Eldon, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you for this podcast. I've really enjoyed my time. And what
yeah,
are your plans for your podcast for the future? So you're just going to chronologically go through different periods of time until you get to now, today?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It will
You've
take me a sorry.
you've got a lifetime's worth of work. It's amazing.
Yes, but it took me a while to start doing it because I was afraid of my language. And then of my poeticism in how I write. But now I see that more and more people kind of digs it and like, oh, this is good. I like this.
Well,
So
there's an amazing saying or phrase that says comparison is the thief of joy. So do it your way. Don't do it any other way. Don't compare
yeah,
yourself to anyone else because you're doing a great job. And we're a huge fan, and I've really enjoyed this talk. And I look forward to speaking to you again, Eldin. Thank you so much for your
yeah,
time.
yeah. Thank you very much, Nick, for inviting me. It was a all pleasure. I promise you.